Birds fly in different directions. A Batfam Podfic written by 24-hour daydreamer and read by Heo Stories. Chapter 2 Summary, in which Tim has a passably good night on patrol and a very bad night otherwise. Also entitled, Don't Leave Your Clothes While Your Sneaky Little Brother Who Holds Grudges Can Get Them. Let's head into it. It was not as bad as the first time, but every time Tim saw Damien decked out in a Robin uniform, a sick feeling of jealousy and frustration rose a bad taste in his mouth. The worst part? Damien seemed to know that. Parading around and always seeming to stay in Tim's line of sight whenever they were in the Batcave together. Since that first night that Tim came downstairs to see Damien in his place at Bruce's side in the Robin uniform, it had not taken long for Tim to pull himself up and get to work crafting a new persona, uniform, and place in the strange double life they all led. It wasn't the same. It would never be the same. But at least he hadn't let Damien shove him completely out of the picture. Tim even kind of liked having the freedom to become something different, to give himself a new name and design a new uniform, watching as Gotham adjusted to the presence of a new vigilante, and seeing his new image showing up in newspapers and the evening newsreels. Yeah, there was a part that liked it, but also a part that would always stubbornly miss his life pre-Damien. Tim unplugged a microchip from the port in the back computer and loaded it back into his communicator, standing and putting it into the pouch on his utility belt, pausing as he caught a glimpse of himself in the reflection of one of the powered-down monitors. It was a work in progress. He wasn't completely satisfied with the look, but Fox had done his sketches justice. Black Kevlar leggings and knee-high boots were paired with red Kevlar short tunic with cross belts that held various pellet bombs for various purposes. The uniform was finished off with a black utility belt that held a shocking number of gadgets around his waist, a black knee-length cape, and as soon as he left the cave, a black domino mask that obscured his eyes and by default his identity. Certainly a work in progress. A cowl might be nice, an effective way to tuck back his hair, and functional wings wouldn't be out of place with a Robin mantle either. A hand landed heavily on the back of his head and ruffled his hair fondly, making Tim stumble forward with a laugh. Ah, Bruce, cut it out! Bruce smiled as he walked past, pulling on his gloves. Come on, night's falling fast. We better get out there. Damien looked up from putting his green domino mask on, scoffing lightly and pulling open the door of the front seat of the Batmobile. I thought you would never say so. I have been ready for the past hour. Tim paused, his lips tightening slightly as he watched Damien step into the Batmobile and pull the door shut behind him. He pulled his gaze to his right as Bruce laid a hand on his shoulder, hating the empathetic sort of smile he found himself waiting for. Is the back okay? I can't have you switch on the way home, Bruce offered gently, seeming to understand exactly how Tim was feeling, yet could not seem to understand just how deeply. Tim sighed and put on his mask, pulling his shoulder out of Bruce's grasp and heading towards the passenger's side backseat door. Whatever, doesn't matter, he muttered, unable to completely keep the bitterness out of his tone. The ride from Gotham was quiet and too tense for Tim's liking. It was causing a sort of creeping tension headache between his temples that he wanted so badly to be rid of, especially since this was the beginning of that night. Maybe he should have actually taken that power nap that he had told Bruce he was going to take. Maybe he should have taken his bike. As soon as Bruce pulled the Batmobile into a dark, unlit alley, Tim threw the door open and stepped out, more than willing to be out of the confines of the vehicle. Alright, I'm taking the North Sea quadrant from patrol tonight, Bruce said, stepping out with his cowl now pulled on. His eyes of his mask glowing in the low light and completing the nerve-tingling look of the bat-shaped shadow. I will join you, Damien stated flatly, crossing around the hood of the Batmobile to stand by Bruce's side. Bruce looked up from Damien towards Tim, who was walking away down the alley, prepping his grappling gun. Red, where are you? I'll cover the South B quadrant, Tim answered without turning back, looking up and firing his gun to wrap around the top of the fire escape ladder of the building in front of him. I haven't been through that area in a week or so. I should probably check things out and make sure it's quiet. Bruce paused, then nodded slowly. Alright then, don't go further than South V on your own though, and keep your comm line open, okay? I know the drill, B. I'll check in with you in 30, Tim replied, pressing the button on the side of his grappling gun, zipping up through the air and climbing neatly over the side of the building to walk over across the rooftop. Any other night he might try to force his way along to stay with Bruce, but tonight he had all the goading he could take from Damien, and any more might just make him say or do something he might regret. Tim strode across the rooftop and fired his grappling gun once more, this time aiming for the signal tower on the top of the skyscraper and taking a jogging leap off the building he was on, pressing the recoil button at the same time as swinging out above the street. He still remembered the first time he had taken a leap off the rooftop, a feeling that could not be duplicated by the platforms in the cave, no matter how many times he practiced. He had been terrified, his stomach seeming to trade places with his heart and his mind going blank and numb as he sailed through the air. He had slammed hard into the side of the building he was grappling to and had to slowly recoil his line and clamber awkwardly up over the edge of the roof, out of breath and trembling, to find Batman standing stoically over him and shaking his head with a sigh. Nothing could ever hurt like the silent disapproval or disappointment from his dark-clad, cowled companion, something that Tim would struggle through a lot their first few years together. But Tim had never been a queer, so even though every piece of his being had screamed not to, that doing so was literally the most idiotic thing he could do, he kept jumping. Now it was a place in his mind which so often stubbornly burst and ran to the point of overload, like an overheating mouthboard, actually went silent. The wind through his hair and whistling past his ears, the intense focus of looking for his next target for his grappling line, watching where he was going while at the same time losing himself to the flipping, running, flying exhilaration placed a constant smirk of satisfaction on his face. Yeah, he might need some rings eventually. Tim flipped over the edge of the skyscraper's rooftop, neatly detaching his line from his anchor point at the same time, landing lightly on his feet and trotting to a stop. He lifted one foot to rest on the raised edge of the roof, leaning forward to lean his elbows against his thigh and look out over the city, taking in a deep breath that was pleasantly free of the smog that typically hung lower in the air. Deep down, he missed Bruce, and he missed the feeling of being at his side as they swing through the city together. But tonight, after the day he had, this was nice. A steady beeping sounded from his left gauntlet, interrupting the silence in Tim's mind and sending him back into vigilante crime is everything mode. He held up his left hand and tapped the top of his wrist to open the hologram screen, while a red blip on the screen blinked rapidly over a spot on the grid map of the city. Alright, looks like a convenience store alarm system trip. I can handle that, Tim mumbled to himself, tapping his wrist to shut off the hologram screen and stepping off the side of the roof, sailing down several floors in swan dive fashion before firing his grappling line and swinging down into the lower areas of the south side of Gotham. These were not quite the slums, but just on the edge of what would be considered the safer side of the city. The buildings were older and shabbier, the street lights dimmer, and the alleys were rougher, a prime area for petty crime and shady dealings. Tim perched on a street light in deep squat, balancing on the balls of his feet as he assessed the situation. A small convenience store and gas station, the glass door was busted in, and four bulky, thuggy-looking individuals were inside, surrounding the front desk with an array of bludgeons, and one of them had a pistol. Cowering behind the desk was the only tenant of the store, a 16-something girl with pepper spray clutched in her trembling hands. Tim reached up and tapped the earpiece in his left ear in Morse code sort of pattern. GCPD, this is Rat Robin reporting in. Robbery in progress at 406 Phillips Street, Gotham Hall. Pick up what will be needed. Backup unnecessary. Okay, sugar. This is how it's gonna work. One of the thugs grinned wolfishly, waving the gun in his hand around as though it were a plaything, his hold loose and unconcerned on the grip. You're gonna open up that register there and let my friend here clean it out. And you're gonna put that cute little thing away so no one gets hurt. You first, Paul. All four of the thugs whirled towards the door to find Red Robin leaning laxly against a rack of chips, twirling his collapsed bow staff back and forth between his fingers like a baton. I mean, as long as we're talking about putting cute things away, Tim smirked. I hope you are also including yourself, since you'll certainly be getting put away for quite a bit. Cripes, I thought you guys might run into one of the bats, but one of the men groaned, taking a step back away from Tim, his hand gripping a piece of pipe in his hand nervously. Stand out there. He's alone. Let's try this little bit fellas. The leader of the gang snapped, pointing his gun towards Red Robin and reaching for the girl behind the corner at the same time. Responded by letting out a high-pitched screech and spraying a cloud of capsaicin into his face, earning herself a cry of pain as he fell to his knees, scrubbing at his eyes and coughing roughly. Tim pressed the button on the side of his bowstaff, giving it a quick twirl and shooting out in a lunge, catching one of the charging thugs in the stomach and sending him stumbling back with a winded grunt before hitting the back of his head against the counter and falling limp and still. Come on now. I think you fellas need to cool off, Tim quipped before spinning lightly and turning sidekick and sending the second man into one of the drink coolers. Dick would be so proud if we were here right now. The third assailant came at him with a yell and swing of a baseball bat that had been altered with nails hammered crudely into the end. Tim ducked under the bat, dropping down into a one-legged squat with his other leg extended and turning quickly to sweep the man's leg out from under him. Tim stood and swung his bowstaff into the side of his head as he struggled to sit up with a crack, knocking him cold. The pair of arms of the man he kicked into the cooler wrapped tightly around Tim's arms and chest in an effort to pin his arms and hold him still, but Tim had already seen the man coming in the reflection of a drink cooler and was ready to transfer the energy of his attack. Tim pitched the back of his hips and neatly flipped the man over his head and sent him crashing into a rack of snacks cakes as if he were tossing a bag of flour. Tim brushed off his shoulders as if to remove traces of filth as he sauntered over to the leader of the break in, who was still whimpering and crying out as he rubbed at his burning eyes. Yep, breaking and entering, attempted assault, theft. You cuties are going to be put away for a good while for sure. The only answer he got was a pathetic whimper and a moans from the back, really staring petty criminals. Tim put each of them in a pair of cuffs and set them outside on the curb, brushing off his hands as he re entered the frankly wrecked convenience store, peeking over the counter and smiling when he saw the girl cramped under the counter, hugging her knees to her chest, with her hands covering her eyes. Hello, Tim greeted gently as he went around and knelt in front of her. He quickly held up a hand to cover the nozzle of the pepper spray as the girl yelped and jerked her head up to deliver a spray if needed. Whoa, hey, easy now. I'm on your side. The teen stared at Tim with a look that could only be described as starstruck, her mouth opening and closing as she fought to find words. Tim grinned and closed his hand lightly over the pepper spray in her hand, gently lowering it from eye level. Good thing, too. You've got good reflexes with that thing. You're you're at Robin! The girl exclaimed finally, her eyes glinting with excitement now instead of fear. I got saved by Red Robin. Tim chuckled and stood, holding out a hand to help her up. That's the name. Can you tell me yours? Oh, I'm Catherine. Catherine Coolidge. And you're Red Robin. Tim nodded and let her out from around the counter and carefully over the shards of glass and scattered convenience store food. Yep, that's right. We went over that part. I would take you home, Catherine, but the police will be here soon and they'll need to take a report from you. But don't worry, they'll make sure you're safe and give you a ride home. And I'll stay with you until they are on their way. They didn't hurt you at all, did they? Oh, no, I'm fine, really, Catherine assured, her face nearly glowing with blush, grinning at Tim as they stepped past the cuffed and gagged thugs and under the light of awning over the gas tanks. I mean, just wait till all my friends hear about this. I really got to be saved by the Red Robin. Not every girl gets to say something like that. Tim shrugged and scratched the back of his neck as his own blush made his face warm at Catherine's gushing. Yeah, well, no big. I mean, all part of the gig. Catherine pulled her phone from her pocket and grinned as her shoulders pinched up in anticipation. Can I? Would you mind if I took selfie? Pics or didn't happen, right? Tim chuckled and nodded. Sure, no problem. I'm kind of picture guy myself. Do you want me to be serious or smiling? Oh, I don't care. Catherine insisted as she turned on her camera and posed next to him, grinning almost wildly up at her phone. Say cheese! Tim leaned into the frame of the selfie camera, holding up his fingers in a peace sign and smiled, rolling his eyes behind his mask as he watched her thumb hit the shutter button over and over as if expecting him to disappear at any moment. Just as his attention was pulled slightly towards the road where sirens and flashing red and blue lights were turning the corner, Catherine turned and planted a kiss on his cheek. Hey, Tim blinked in surprise and stepped back to find her grinning and batting her lashes at him. I'd let you save me any time, Red Robin, she gushed, making a kissy face and winking. Hopefully sooner than later. Tim smirked and started back towards the alley. For your sake, Catherine, let's hope not, but thanks for the compliment. Take care of yourself out there, Catherine, and don't forget to get yourself a new pepper spray. They lose their power and potency after being used. He shot his grappling gun straight up and clicked his tongue as he shot her finger gun before pressing the recoil button and zipping up to the rooftop. Tim knelt and watched for a few minutes as 3 police cars pulled up, the officers piling out quickly with guns in hand. They quickly apprehended the thugs and took Catherine to the side, talking to her for a few minutes before helping her into one of the cars. He smiled as he stood and walked a few paces over to sit on the top of an air conditioning unit, opening his wrist computer and typing up a report of the incident. Just as he was starting to finish it, the cool hair stood stiff on the back of Tim's neck, and a shudder threatened to travel down his spine. He knew this feeling. He had felt it many times before and had become trained to its presence and was being watched. Tim stood, glancing around slowly so that he did not look as though he were actually looking for anything in particular. And disturbingly, he truly did not see anyone or anything. Red, check in, please. Tim reached up and tapped his earpiece once. Red Robin here, all's well. Your stats are elevated. Are you alright? Bruce's voice was slightly tense, and Tim remembered one of the many reasons why he hated that Bruce had all of their uniforms bugged with heart, heat, and stress monitors. I'm all good, Batman. Handled a minor break-in and attempted theft, Tim replied as he strolled to the edge of the roof. No civilians were harmed, and the perpetrators are on their way to spend an unpleasant night in the GCPD holding cell. You said you'd check in with me in 30 minutes. You didn't. Tim huffed and fought the urge to roll his eyes. I was mid-situation at the 30-minute mark. Checking in while punching is a little difficult, you'll admit. I could have done both easily. Damien's hearty voice made Tim set his jaw hard, nearly biting the side of his tongue. The adults aren't talking at the moment, Robin, Tim growled, his hands clenching so hard the leather squeaked between his fingers and palms. Irresponsible and ineffective, as usual. At least you aren't trying to surprise us. Hush. Bruce's command was short and curt, and it did the job of ending Damien's commentary. I see your report now, Robin. Continue as your patrol as planned. Nice job. Yeah, copy that. Tim replied, checking his grappling gun before firing it off towards a building across the street from him. Over and out, B. Over and out, Red. Keep me posted. Tim took a tighter grip on his gun, letting out a long sigh, grunting out a higher pitch than he wanted it to be noise of frustration as he kicked the raised bit of a wall of the roof. Had split up to escape Damien's incessant nerve-tromping, and still the little brat popped up. He stepped off the edge of the roof, swinging down low across the street, his heart leaping into his throat as he just narrowly pulled himself up out of the way of a semi-truck. He tripped off the edge of the roof he pulled himself up onto, huffing a heavy breath as he tried to rise his breathing before Bruce noticed the spike in his heart rate and checked in again. Boy, the little demon was in his head tonight. He hated it when it was like this. It made him sloppy, distracted, ineffective. Dang it, Tim growled, turning and punching a ventilation pipe, immediately regretting it as he pulled his fist from the dent and ooked the pins and needles of pain from it as he winced hard and limped around in a little circle. Ow! Ah! Biscuits! Flipping flaming crap! He was throwing a tantrum. He was fully aware, but he was alone, at least 20 stories up, and in desperate need to vent. He kicked an empty soda can, sending it clattering across the flat rooftop. Tim froze, still holding his aching hand squeezed on his armpit, but his attention was fully on the can as it rolled to an awkward stop due to the dent his boot had left in it, but also because of a different kind of dent. He looked around and then back to the can. On some rooftops, it was not unusual to find cigarette butts, drink cans, and other litter, since the tenants of the apartment buildings would at times hang out with friends in the fresh air without having to leave the building. But this building was an office building, with no way to access the roof except the crawl space manholes. Tim walked over and knelt by the can, picking it up and feeling his heart drop as he found a bullet hole straight through the can. He looked up and saw a spout of similar cans, all nitro Pepsi and all with bullet holes through them. The return of prickling feeling of being watched made him stand and whirl around. But that was nothing. Not even the scanners in his eyelens of his mask picked up any sign of body heat or movement. Jeez, Red, you're losing it tonight, Tim mumbled as he dropped the can and stared out across the city once more, determined to shake the feeling of uncertainty that had been building throughout the day. Thank goodness that the water bills were not a concern for the Wayne household. Tim did not do it often, but every once in a while he liked to spend just this side of an obscene amount of time in the showers after patrol. Usually, remembering to shower and actually taking the time to do so was the last thing on Tim's mind. Bruce even had to point out at times that his hair was looking a little greasy, and just how long had it been since he last showered? But every once in a while, especially when his stress levels went up, Tim liked to just stand under the almost too hot stream of water in the large Batcave showers, eyes closed, heads tilted back as far as would go with water streaming right in his face, dangling from his shoulders, joints, and hands loose at his sides as he swayed on his feet. Tonight was the one of those nights. The rest of his patrol had been fine, nothing too much out of the ordinary for the south side of Gotham. A few carjackings, other convenience store robbery, an apartment break-in, and a pickpocketing incident with a 12-year-old who had been dared to do it by a group of older boys. What had been hard was the constant little snips from Damien every time Tim and Bruce checked in with each other. It was stupidly maddening. All his muttered little calm remarks and quips about how he could have done something better or achieved better results than Tim had. Bruce, of course, had told him several times to stop, but as threatening and as potent as everything on else seemed to think Bruce was, Damien just seemed to have an annoying immunity to it, and so continued his commentary throughout the night. It had made him feel tense, frustrated, and just simply off his game. Not enough that anyone outside his head would notice, or had noticed, mind you, but enough that he knew it, and that was enough to rattle him. The ride back to the Batcave had been quiet, and Tim had not even tried to argue the front seat when Damien had claimed it, with a silent glare and hearty sniff of dismissal as he stepped into the vehicle. Tim just did not have the patience or ability to fight in a way that would do anything but make him look even more pathetic than he already felt. Tim sighed and reached out blindly to switch off the water, knowing he was only prolonging the inevitable of facing the world outside the shower. Then swiped the excess water from his face and shook his head back and forth, water droplets flying from his hair. He opened the door enough to reach out for his towel, frowning as he felt around and finally found the hook. But no towel. Hey! Tim cried as he peeked out and saw Damien standing outside the shower with his towel and clothes in hand. An evil little smirk plastered across his face. You really should not leave your things lying all over the floor, Drake. Quite slobbish of you, Damien quipped, carefully folding Tim's shorts and shirt over his arm and tossing his towel over his shoulder. Damien, leave my stuff alone and give me my towel, Tim demanded, leaning out around the shower door a little and reaching out for the towel. Only to have Damien take a step back. Damien! You should really try to be less of a mess, you know, Damien scolded, acting as though he had not heard Tim at all and grinning in a way that showed his teeth. A rare sort of expression for Damien that reminded Tim of a wolf baring his teeth. It would keep me from having to pick up after you. Damien, give it back! Tim cried as he leaned a little further out and made a grab for the edge of the towel, to which Damien responded by stepping back further. You little pest! Give me my towel! Damien sniffed with mild amusement as he turned and strolled down the hallway of the shower room, waving over his shoulder gently. I'll help you this once, Drake, but do not expect this to become a habit. You are welcome. Damien, come back here! Tim yelled, slamming his fist down on the wet, bare thigh. You little brat! Don't you dare walk away from me! Damien! The shower room was cast into pitch black darkness as a loud click sound as Damien flicked off the lights and closed the door. You rotten little demon! Tim Albert screamed, unfortunately, to no effect as he found himself in steamy, silent darkness with no towel, no clothes. Tim let out a groan of frustration between his gritted teeth as he let his head fall towards against the shower door, trying to harness his anger so he could start thinking clearly. Okay, Tim, think. The towels are in the next room over. That's not far. Everyone's probably upstairs by now. Should be able to slip over and get a towel, then find my spare set of gym clothes in the locker room. Tim took a deep breath and stepped out of the shower, being extra careful not to slip on the towel, and made his way through the dark by muscle memory and feel down the hallway of the shower stalls. Why do we have so many flippin' showers? There's never more than 2 people at a time in here. This is so stupid and humiliating. At least I'm the only one. Tim's eyes smiled as the light flooded the space, making his arm wince and blink rapidly as he tried to regain his vision. Then realization hit him that he was no longer alone. Bruce! He turned slightly to the side and pulled his leg a little as his hands flew to cover himself. Bruce blinked out of his dazed stare at the strange discovery after flipping on the light and turned his face away while holding up a hand to hide Tim from his line of sight. Tim, what are you... Where... Why... Why are you standing here in the dark without your clothes? Tim frowned deeply, flushing from his collarbone to his ear tips in both embarrassment and anger. Because Damien took my clothes and towel, he gritted out between his clenched teeth. He what? Bruce asked, forgetting for a moment and turning towards Tim with his brow drawn in confusion before quickly closing his eyes and looking away when Tim exclaimed his name indignantly. Sorry. Why did he do that? You expect me to be able to read the little demon's mind? Tim scoffed, still covering his pride and glaring at Bruce in annoyance. He's evil. Bruce sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. He's not evil, Tim, and I've asked you to stop calling him demon. He held his hand out in front of his sides in a helpless shrug, as once more seemed to forget that Tim was standing in front of him in nothing but leftover water droplets from his shower. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Bruce! Tim interrupted, widening his eyes pointedly as he jutting his head as he shrugged his shoulders a little as if to make his situation more obvious. Still indecent here. Bruce turned his back on Tim to avoid looking at him. Oh, geez, sorry. Okay, just hang on, Tim. Stay right there. I'll get you a towel. Tim groaned and slumped against the wall as Bruce left, reaching over to rub his hand over his face and back through his still sopping hair. I could die right now. Just fall down dead and be perfectly happy for the escape. he mumbled to himself, stepping into the dry, empty shower to his left and pulling the door closed a little harder than he normally would, and stood there with his arms crossed tightly against his chest, waiting on Bruce to save him from his predicament. Tim, first stall, Tim replied shortly, seeing Bruce's hazed figure appear outside through the textured glass door. Here, a few dry clothes and one to wrap it up in. Do you want me to get you a pair of clothes? Bruce asked as his hands holding the towel appeared on the top of the door. Tim took the towels and dropped them into the shower bench in front of him. No, it's fine, he grumbled, and he roughly wiped down his body and scrubbed the water from his hair. The blurred outline of Bruce did not move or seem to be leaving, and after a couple of minutes he spoke again, his voice echoing a bit in the mostly empty room. Did you see him take your clothes? Tim rolled his eyes as he took another towel and paid more attention to his hair, scrunching it into the towel to sop up the water. No, you know what, Bruce? No, I think I was totally hallucinating watching him take my clothes and towel. That's why I was outside the shower, buck naked, in the dark. He sniffed sarcastically. I didn't say you were hallucinating or making it up, Bruce assured quickly. I just want to get some details, that's all. I believe you, Tim. I do. Really. Tim wrapped the third towel around his waist and tucked the Tim wrapped the third towel around his waist and tucked the edge in so it would stay in place. Then pushed open the door, getting a little wicked satisfaction in watching Bruce step back quickly to avoid getting smashed in the face. When his eyes met Bruce's for a moment, a hot flush of rekindled embarrassment crept up from his chest and crawled up to settle heavily in his cheeks. He set his jaw and walked briskly past Bruce, dropping the towels he had used to dry off in the hamper by the door. The chilled air of the cave made his drying skin prickle with goosebumps as he crossed the cold metal floors to his locker near the padded training area, spinning the knob on his combination lock back and forth briskly until it clicked open, then pulled the door open and let out an exasperated sigh before letting his head fall forward so his chin rested against his cheek. Nest. Besides several empty water bottles, packages, and half-eaten protein bars, grungy sweat rags and with questionable stains, and a few mismatched pairs of socks, his lock was void of anything helpful. Tim, can I? No, Tim huffed, turning and striding towards the elevator, keeping his gaze down and as far away from Bruce as possible as he gripped the place where he had his towel tucked that it wouldn't slip. I'll just go to my room. I'm probably not coming back down tonight, so you don't have to keep the computer on for me. Bruce stepped forward and held out a hand, as if he wanted to do or say something, but his mouth closed as he nodded, watching Tim stalk up the stairs, leaving behind damp, foggy footprints on the metal floors in his wake. All right, Tim, that's probably for the best. I'll be up in the middle. Yeah, sure, Tim grumbled as he punched up the up arrow on the elevator and stepped inside, grateful for the doors that closed him off from the world for a minute so he could let out a frustrated, humiliated, fed up yell of exasperation. And that's the end of chapter 2. I hope you didn't have too much inconvenience with the background noise. It's quite loud outside at the moment, but well, I was feeling like recording something, and yeah, it shouldn't be too distracting, I think. See you next week. Bye.